Uh, Welcome to yet another edition of Acfim Talks, and a very good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are watching us from. My name is Felix Kafuma, and today in yet another edition, we are discussing captivity of state institutions in Uganda, and under spotlight is the case of Uganda Airlines. Before we start, today, the 26th of August, allow me to first observe a moment of silence for a fallen general, General Eli Tumwine, who passed on yesterday, succumbed to lung cancer. And it's important that we observe a moment of silence to remember him. And may his soul rest in peace. Okay, I'm being joined by two gentlemen. So far, I already have Godbert Mushabe on call. I'll be introducing him in a short while. But as usual, as it is the case, this is where I welcome everybody to be part of this discussion. You can join us on our social media platforms. We are live on Acfim Facebook page live, Acfim Twitter at Acfim UG, and also on our YouTube, Acfim Uganda. You can be able to catch us and also be part of this interesting conversation as we take a detour on the captivity of state institutions in Uganda and looking at Uganda Airlines as a case study. This show is weekly. Every Friday at 11 up to midday, you catch us and you can be able to get the notifications and be part of this conversation. Like it is usually the case, allow me to make a bit of a preamble for anybody who's just joining us to appreciate where we are coming from and why should we be having this conversation. Like you all know that if you've been in Uganda or if you've been following Uganda, the way and the manner in which the management of public affairs is done, you'll appreciate that micromanagement has been a common denominator in President Museveni's style of leadership. And apologies for Museveni's style of management. I've always argued that by doing so, Museveni is responding to the trust that has been abused by those that he has entrusted with the levers of power, having been betrayed. And he has often come out to say that they have been self-centered and they've ended up being corrupt and thus frustrating his vision. But critics that argue against Museveni's management style argue again that this style is responsible for the dysfunctionalization of state institutions, where systems have experienced systemic distortions that have resulted into captivity of state institutions. The coexistence of formal and informal decision-making systems in public institutions, where the latter is stronger, has led to collapse of once powerful organizations. And we can, in focus, talk about the Uganda Airlines of 1976 to 2001 as one of the classic cases to make this intro to be relevant. We shall also appreciate the fact that we have re-established Uganda Airlines just 2 years back, and now it's in the news for the wrong or right reasons as we debate and question whether Museveni's regime has learned anything or forgotten anything from the collapse of the airline in 2001. Currently, the young airline is being probed by the Parliamentary Committee on State Authorities and State Enterprises, COSASI, and the information coming through leaves a lot to be desired. The probe has raised red flags on the recruitment process of the current ED of the airline, Bamturaki Jennifer, who on the directive of President Museveni was appointed in that position. This directive, if you've been following, you remember that it short-circuited an ongoing recruitment process, which was left with only 2 days to close. And today on Acfim Talks, I'm privileged to host two distinguished gentlemen. One is Godba Tumushabe, who is the Associate Director at the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, a think tank. He's also a lawyer and a development policy analyst and a social entrepreneur. Goodbye, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Felix. It's a great pleasure to be at Acfim Talks. And good morning and good evening, everybody in the show.
Thank you so much, Goodbye, to make it and be part of this conversation. I'll be joined by Captain Francis Babu, who said he's running late, but he'll be part of this conversation. And when he comes, I'll be able to introduce him and also help him settle in and we get the conversation started. As we wait for Captain Francis Babu, let me start with Godba. I'm sure Godba has been following the developments concerning the Kosase probe into Uganda Airlines. And you'll agree with me, maybe disagree, but probably I'll pick your thoughts on this one, because political interference in the governance and management of state institutions in Uganda seems to characterize Museveni's regime and has been blamed for the systematic distortions, which have resulted into what some of us call the captivity of state institutions. Uganda Airlines is one of the victims, as we see. What is your take on this argument?
Yeah, no, I actually don't substantially agree with you, but let me put it this way, that the question of Uganda Airlines is actually just a footnote in the whole discourse of capture of the state in the country. So in other words, Uganda Airlines is a very, very small footnote there in the story, because what we have in Uganda, and what we haven't really spent a lot of time to understand, is that the entire struggle by Museveni and his group to fight a war in 1980 was basically a struggle to capture state institutions, or to capture the state of Uganda. And of course, you can capture the state, and then if you are a disciplined leadership, you can then use those state institutions to liberate themselves and be the ones to run the country. That's what we call, when we talk of states and
I seem to be losing you, Godba, in terms of connection.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now that's better.
Yeah. No, so I was mentioning that the Museveni and his group, the NRA, fought a war purposely to capture the state and therefore the state institutions. Now, when you have statesmen and women, it is those statesmen and women that then work to liberate the institutions of state, so that they are the ones which are running the country. Now, unfortunately, when you go into when you fully understand Museveni and the way he has run the country, is that actually they wanted to capture the state institutions and pursue an agenda that they had defined, and they are the ones who own the agenda. So you realize from the time they came to power in 1986, they have actually been focusing more on reconfiguring those institutions to be able to pursue their agenda, not to pursue the agenda of the state of Uganda, which would be a shared agenda. So what you have now is that you have captured the executive and personalized it in the form of the presidency. So you have an all-powerful president who basically looks at the country as his real estate company, and is able and thinks that he can be able to do everything, that he's not accountable to anybody. That is what you call the state capture. You see that he has been able to reconfigure the parliament, that the parliament, the legislature that we agreed on during the constitution making process has substantially changed right from 1996 to the present, that what you have now is the shadow of the legislature. You basically have men and women who run around the president, and the majority of them run around the president, and they're always thinking of what is the president thinking, what does he want to hear, and you no longer have an independent legislature that is supposed to play the oversight and accountability role and check the excesses of power of the legislature, of the executive. You have the judiciary. This is a captured institution that to the extent that you find the president can decide in his own right as an individual and say he's not going to appoint a chief justice, and the judiciary can spend more than 2 years without a head. Because under the concept of separation of powers, these institutions, these three arms of the state, the executive, the judiciary, the legislature, they are supposed to be equal, and they are supposed to be accountable to each other. So there should be no point, there should be no time when any of these institutions does not have a head. So that is really that's the bottom line. So the fact that the president can do things on his whims, and he's not accountable to Parliament, he's not accountable to the citizens, that's basically what you have as the state capture. Now you've seen that capture has extended now to the public service. So there is a lot of reconfiguration of the public service, where you are having the military take over most civilian institutions. You are having, the Uganda police, for example, that's an institution that has been taken over by the military. You go to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The people who are supposed to be civilian leaders, the ministers, all of them are generals. The permanent secretary is a military general. The head of immigration is a military general. You can move to Minister of Agriculture. The permanent secretary is a military general. So you basically see that this is a deliberate effort to be able to capture the institutions of state and use them to further his personal agenda and mission the way he understands it. So that's why I'm saying that something like Uganda Airlines is really a footnote in the overall architecture of state institutions, and the extent to which Mr. Museveni and the people around him who know what actually the agenda is have been able to capture the institutions of state of Uganda.
Okay, but let's first pack it here, the issue of what we call a directive, because many have come out to say I was directed. It was a directive. Can a directive be challenged? When do we draw a line between a directive and an advisory? Because looks like when the president directs, people don't question whether it's within the law, but go ahead and implement as directed. Even those we think that are well-read and can interpret the law and are good statesmen. When do we draw the line between a directive and beyond that? Can we have a situation whereby we have leaders with a backbone to say no to directives that are contravening or contradicting the rules of engagement, the laws, and for the good cause of Uganda?
No, unfortunately, when you have reached the point of state capture, those leaders, you won't find them. Because the process of capturing the state is a process of making sure that decision-making power is concentrated in the hands of those who want to control the state. So by the time we reach the kinds of state capture that we have now in Uganda, the people you are talking about are rarely available. You will not find them around. So General Katumba Wamala will get a directive from the president. First of all, he's a general. The person giving him a directive is the commander-in-chief. So he can just order for his arrest if he does not follow the directive. If Katumba was arrested for disobeying the directives of the president, the likelihood is that he will be tried in the court martial, not even in the ordinary courts. But even the ordinary courts, they will not protect you because even them, they have been captured. The legislature, the parliament will not question your arrest because it has also been captured. The NRM MPs will be summoned to State House, and Museveni will explain why it is important to arrest Katumba Wamala for disobeying his directives, and he will tell them the directives are supposed to help NRM to keep power, and everybody, all these MPs want NRM to keep power because that is the patronage system in which they are participating. So, in other words, your question is actually not relevant in the sense that at the time when these directives are being issued and nobody can challenge them, the state capture is literally complete. And that is what we are dealing with right now.
So, looking at the Uganda Airlines situation, because some have argued that probably, you remember when this kind of first came out about a year back, and some people are saying that probably this is the time. Some have argued that the president is definitely trying to protect the interest and the investment of Uganda Airlines, having been the biggest. He had a lot of interest in it when it was starting, and from your view, should we say that the involvement of Uganda Airlines do they presuppose captivity in its real sense, or protection of interests of Uganda Airlines on behalf of Ugandans?
I don't understand your question, Felix, because what are the interests of Ugandans?
The interests of Ugandans are to have a functional national carrier as it was 25 years back. I think that's the interest of every Ugandan.
The interest of Ugandans is to have a functional airline national carrier.
Yes.
And almost all of us know how successful enterprises or airlines are run. You can't pick some guy called Godberg, Felix, and say you go and run an airline. I don't think that is in the interest of Ugandans. The carrier is financed by Ugandan taxpayers.
True.
We have put in their money. We expect that whoever is responsible is able to follow specific procedures and guidelines and accountability rules to be able to employ staff and hold them accountable to certain levels of performance. So there is no way you can tell me that the desired situation that there is some grand ayatollah seated in State House, and he's the only one who knows how an airline is run, and therefore he can go pick and choose, pick a Felix Kafuma and deploy you and say, I'm protecting the interests of Ugandans. So we need to be able to reflect on this approach. This whole thing that
but I think I lost you a bit on the network connection. Okay, that's good. But I think I've lost good. But can you hear me? I think I've lost you. Okay, I think I've lost God, but he was trying to make a case of whether the interests of Ugandans are being.
Hello, Felix.
Yes, you're back.
No, I realized I should have gone on the computer because these are incoming calls. Actually, they are the ones disrupting. My apologies.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, so yes. The point I was making is that the idea that you can have some grand ayatollah there in State House, and he's the only one who knows the vision of Ugandans, and he can't even trust the people that he appoints to run the airline or other agencies on our behalf. And every time he has to interfere with ordinary processes of doing things, because he's acting as a grand ayatollah, is exactly the clear manifestation of state capture. So that's what exactly you are dealing with.
All right. I'm hoping I can have Francis Babu join on set, because the couple of questions that I would want to ask Captain Francis Babu, concerning the technicalities of running an airline. But as I wait for Captain Francis Babu, I'll still run with Godba on this one. So, hypothetically speaking, and let's be honest with this conversation, what is the most likely outcome of the COSASE probe? Is it just yet another one of those?
It is Museveni who determines what the outcome would be, because the current evidence has shown that whenever he wants something, it's done the way he wants it. I think for me, the most telling of all these parliamentary probes was the inquiry, the committee inquiry into the Kasese massacres, where the president met the Committee on Internal Affairs and said this has to stop, and they all went hiding. And there are a couple of other processes that that have gone on. So what happens, the end game of this inquiry is going to be more about what Museveni wants to be done. I know, for example, that he has also talked to some of the members on the committee, that I have it on full authority, that he has been talking to some of the members on the committee in the background. And you see, when you are an NRM MP and the president calls you and have a telephone conversation with you, even if he appears that he's consulting you, if you don't, most of these NRMPs, they don't really have the stamina. They will just collapse. They can no longer sustain the kind of inquiry that they are doing. So my reading is that given the various antecedents that we've had, this inquiry ends the way Museveni wants it. If it doesn't, then it means that you will see MPs that have decided to take their position as a legislature with equal power to the executive. But up until now, we haven't seen members of parliament appreciating that they have power vested in them by the constitution, and the people of Uganda who elect them, that they can choose to say, we have to put a stop to this kind of illegal actions by this guy.
Okay, but I understand that you're a businessman. So there's a question here which I want you to do justice to. Hypothetically speaking, and I think there have been a lot of conversation around the recruitment process during this probe, and let's look at the way the recruitment of the CEO was interfered with. And people are now arguing that what is the likelihood that the recruitment of more sensitive personnel, such as pilots or engineers, was also not interfered with? And if we are to borrow the precedent of interfering with the appointment of the executive director, what is the implication on the entire running of the airline if the entire process is politically interfered with?
First of all, maybe let me just do a clarification. I said maybe I'm not even a businessman. I just do business. I hope there's a difference. I try to do business, but when I do business, one of the things I've done, and by the way, it's extending the business to the NGO world where I have been running organizations. And I have this fundamental belief that the success of any business depends on the capacity of that business to compete for talent. And this is in terms of what is the job that you have, what is the best talent you can get on the market, and are you able to pay for it? So that is for me the bottom line. So even and now with more technical businesses like an airline, you really want to be at the top there competing. And I think that's why there is even the acceptance that maybe the state should be able to step in and subsidize these operations. So if Ugandan taxpayers are paying, we can hire the best people around the world to be able to run the airline and make it compete with other international airlines. Now, the problem is that the moment you get a process that is, first of all, that looks fraudulent, that lacks integrity, and it delivers people with questionable credentials, you are basically undermining the airline. I was very, very taken aback when I read a statement from General Katumba Wamala, basically saying that the COSASE probe and the discussions that are going on this probe are undermining this little child called Uganda Airlines. And I'm like, but how come a person of impeccable credentials like Katumba Wamala cannot understand that actually the biggest danger to this airline are responsible people who are vested with authority are taking the wrong decisions or acting in a fraudulent manner that lacks accountability. Having said that, the recruitment of staff, how they are recruited, will determine how accountable they are, how responsible they are. If you are recruited through the back door, you spend more time trying to appease your appointing authority, because it means that if you are appointed through the back door, it also means that you can actually be disappointed through the back door. So in other words, you spend more time trying to appease the appointing authority rather than doing your business and demanding that certain things be done the right way, because that's how the business will succeed.
Okay, we still are discussing the case of Uganda Airlines, but in the broader scheme of things, the captivity of state institutions in Uganda. And with me, I have Godbert Mushabe, who is the Associate Director at the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. I'm also expecting Captain Francis Babu to join us and offer more technical input on aspects to do with running the airline. But before we go for a break, I think I have time for one more question for God, but before we take a break, that again, running with what General Katumba Wamala said, it seems like they're more concerned that the proceedings are projecting a certain image of how the airline is being managed, with the implication that the publicity might not be good for the business. Given the fact that the airline is still young. Does this make sense from the business perspective? Because one can actually argue that, okay, fine, you are trying to do surgery on a problem, but the way you are handling it is that you are exposing the dirty linens that are making us look incompetent and less competitive, that might scare business away. What's your perspective on this one, God?
No, you see, that's the point that I'm trying to make, that the Ugandans who are discussing these questions of impropriety in the recruitment of the CEO and generally how the company is operating are not the problem. The problem are the people who are acting with impropriety. The problem is the president who sits there and basically interferes with the running of the airline because he thinks that he's the grand ayatollah and he can do anything. It's okay for you to say, I am the appointing authority, but you see, the framers of our constitution never envisaged that you'd have some guy seated somewhere in State House, and that guy could be Museveni, it can be a Kafuma, it can be a Godba. That you'd have some guy seated there, and that guy is the one appointing everybody, every other place the guy is appointing everybody. You appoint cabinet ministers, and they fail to do their work. You do the work for them. You interfere with their decisions. And man, that is how you kill an airline. The Ugandans who are discussing this impropriety and the fraud that we are seeing from COSASE probe are not the ones who are the problem. I think General Katumba Wamala, many of us have a lot of respect for him and his personality and his service to the nation, but he needs to take a step back and see where is the problem, because Ugandans are not the problem. The members of parliament who are inquiring into this airline within the COSASE committee are not the problem. The problem is President Museveni and General Katumba Wamala, who are failing to follow the rules on how to run an entity like Uganda Airlines.
Thank you so much. This is where we take a break, and then when we come back, we'll resume with the discussions on the Uganda Airlines as a case study and how captured are state institutions in Uganda. You are still watching Acfim Talks, and welcome back from the break. We're discussing captivity of state institutions in Uganda, a case of Uganda Airlines. And before we went for a break, we were trying to make sense of the actions of the president, his involvement in the recruitment process, and its implications on the functionality of Uganda Airlines. But in the bigger, broader scheme of things, how does this play out in this functionalizing state institutions, as this is just one of the many? With me, I have Godba Tumushabe, who is helping us make sense of all these developments. Godba, I want us to look at how all this behavior of the president, as you've ably put it, how does this now serve or fit into his interests of regime survival?
Yeah, no, so it's basically, that's actually what it is in its essence. For you to stay in power for the amount of time that President Museveni has stayed in power, you have to have one power center. Dictatorships and autocratic regimes cannot afford or to have alternative centers of power. So in other words, what you are seeing and real estate capture means that all the institutions of state are demobilized and brought under one person, under the grip of one person. Everybody and every institution is accountable to him, and this long-serving ruler then is able to deploy people in all these institutions without any question. So the people are there in those institutions to serve him or her, not to serve Uganda. The first and foremost responsibility of a person who has been appointed in the manner in which Bamuturachi has been appointed is that he has to first, his royalty or her royalty is first to the president before it goes to Uganda. So that's the danger that you have there, that almost everybody in those positions basically serves more the president. Their royalty is with the president rather than Uganda.
Thank you so much. Let me read some of the comments coming through. One from Henry Mguzu, who is asking whether does the Grand Ayatollah have the expertise to determine the competences of the best person to run the Uganda Airlines? I think he's referring to the president sitting where he is and makes the appointments. Does he have the relevant expertise to make such critical decisions?
Yeah, so basically, actually the constitution from almost every state, the constitution and other laws acknowledge that there is no single person who is vested with the skills and the expertise to be able to determine who is best qualified to run these agencies. So that's why the national laws establish mechanisms that help this person to be able to do that work. So the Grand Ayatollah, in this case, if the president was acting as a president of Uganda who is accountable to everybody, is supposed to be acting on the advice and guidance of the institutions that have been put in place. So the Uganda Airlines has a board. The board is given authority to be able to recruit people into the airline. So the board is given the appointing authority, or the minister is given the appointing authority, or in some cases, the president. But there is a mechanism for processing who is qualified to run this airline. In the Public Service General, you have the Public Service Commission, which processes. The appointing authority of every staff of the public service is the President of the Republic of Uganda. But that office, that president, only appoints people who have been processed by the Public Service Commission, because the Public Service Commission has their qualifications on how you become a member of the Public Service Commission in order to be able to process people who are appointed by the president or the minister. The Judicial Service Commission processes the appointments in the judicial service. What we have seen, like in the case of Uganda Airline, what we have seen is the president even overruling the Judicial Service Commission, and that exactly is the manifestation of regime of state capture. So Henry, the point I'm making is that there is no Grand Ayatollah, there is no one person who is vested with all the skills and the experience and everything to determine who can run everything. On the contrary, our laws create procedures and processes and mechanisms that are supposed to do the processing of those people, and then they are appointed in formal appointments the way the law provides. State capture means that someone like Museveni and the people around him basically demobilize all those institutions and mechanisms, and they take over the responsibility. and they can do the appointments without question.
Okay. Let's now focus more on the airline itself. And I'm glad. Yes, Captain, you are right on time. Good morning.
Morning to you, and I hope you're having a good day.
Yes, we are having a good day. We had missed you, but I'm glad that you've been able to join us. We have, like I said earlier, that we'll be joined Captain Francis Babu, who is one of the few people who has wealth of knowledge and experience in this aviation industry. He's a businessman, he's a politician, he's a retired captain, and has held several positions in civil aviation management and civic leadership. It's good to have you once again, Captain, and I'm going to start with you straight away.
Yeah, okay, go on. What are we talking about? Because I've been hearing about state enterprises.
Yes, we are discussing.
You people seem to have been psyched by the airline, and everybody's talking about airline. What are we talking about this morning?
We are talking about the airline, but it's a different angle. But now it's where we are discussing the capture of state institutions and looking at Uganda Airlines as one of the classic case that is exemplifying what is happening or what has already been happening. And one of the reasons why I think I should throw you in here is the fact that I've listened to you on a couple of occasions, sharing your expertise, and
yes,
you will agree with me, and I think I agree with you when you say because Uganda Airlines only owns 6 jets at the moment.
yes,
and it started 2 years ago, meaning it's and you've kept saying it's a startup business. And if someone is running a startup business of that nature, how should such a business be managed?
Yeah, well, let me get the point very clear. I think what people are getting totally wrong, and this is very unfortunate, because our educational system we've had here since the 1940s, when the Makerere University was created, completely ignored certain disciplines. For example, the technical subjects initially, these guys didn't even want us to know. There's even a law on our law book which doesn't allow us to become ironmongers, because they fear the locals will be able to make guns and things like that. But that's put apart. It's fun. A debate for another day. The aviation industry was completely kept out of our syllabuses. We actually never studied it, and we did not even go into our management system. It is something that was way out there. And in the 1960s, towards the end, some of the East African community, which was then formed, they wanted to go into the aviation industry. And in fact, if you remember, the secretariats of the East African community, they formed directorates, including the Auditor General. There was a lot of things there. It was quite an enterprise. And the Directorate of Civil Aviation, the government wanted to enter into aviation. We then had East African Airways, which had been started by British Aircraft Corporation. And they wanted to get Africans in there. In fact, among the pilots, they didn't have any local person. The first pilots to be trained here were trained by Ethiopian Airlines, by Haile Selassie. Is a man called Kiwanukan Kitenda, and they were actually brothers. And it was the Kabaka of Buganda who managed to get them to be trained there. These were trained in the 90s. They're the first African pilots to be trained. Just to give you a picture, East African Airways, then they had what they called the East African Pilot Scheme and Aviation Scheme, where there was a fast tracking of getting Africans into the aviation sector. And they first started with the ground people, air traffic controllers, navigation officers, engineers, technicians who worked on the ground. And most of those schools were put up in Kenya because the East African Community headquarters at the time was in Nairobi. They trained the people. So there is a completely different system. People are being trained. Even in Britain, it was not part of the university. It was independent. Most of their people were trained in the Air Force, and then from the Air Force, they would go into the airline. In fact, just to give you a very, I normally want to tell you people these things. So like, the reason why you see a pilot is got 4 bars, half an inch bars, is because they were copying it from the Navy. The Air Force had copied it from the Navy, and the man who flew those airplanes during the Second World War was called a group captain. And therefore, they picked this one up, and today we have what you call captains. This, if you take them into the Air Force, they'll be equivalent to colonels. Just very quickly, and the reason I'm giving you all this background to show you that we were not educated into that area. It is something that came up in the 60s. And therefore, the management of it, the first people who were really trained were people in the East African community. There was a man called Z.M. Balidawa, who was our director. He was trained as an air traffic controller. He was trained as a pilot. He was trained in management. He was trained in navigation. So when they made him a director, he had already been trained in all those areas on top of his degree, which was a scientific degree then. Then he went on to help us to become also pilots and engineers and so on and so forth. That is East African Air. So they were never trained as part of our education establishment. In other words, they never went to the universities we had. They were trained outside those universities. So what is happening today? We inherited an industry that was trained outside our normal system. So even getting people to work in there, we are having problems because we are not following the norm. The British, they train their people and then they bring them into the airline, retrain them again. And then by the time you become a managing director of British Aircraft Corporation, you have been through a series of training. So going, that said and done, we in Africa, if you look at Ethiopian Airlines, it was started by Transworld Airline. Now, Transworld Airline, Haile Selassie asked them to come. And they trained the Ethiopians. They started a flying school. They started a management school. They started a ground school for the people who work in the airline. So these were trained at Bole Airport in Addis Ababa. And when you go to British Airways, the British Overseas Corporate, BOSC then, they trained East African Airways the same way. People were being trained at Embakasi. I did engineering, and then eventually I went into flying. Same thing was being done. Some of us were taken to Britain in British Aircraft Corporation. Now, if you go to all airlines, El Al, which is Israeli airline, you go to Singapore Airline, you find that there were major people who were there during the startup. So that brings me back to Uganda Airlines. If you want Uganda Airlines to really become good, you've got to accept that you are doing a startup, and you require these experts who can start it up. Train our people. Even if you want all these people, you've got relatives and you want all sorts of, you bring them under these people. They are trained over a period of time, and then they take over the management of that organization. And I'll give you a very quick example. When we started the Civil Aviation Authority, which is there now, the board of directors, I was part of that board. I told them that when we recruit these people, they have to be trained. And yes, we did recruit, and we got some very good people who had been in different management levels. And we had people with all sorts of, credentials. But we took one who had not only the credentials, but had an experience of 20 years in management. When we took that person over, we got some people from ICAO who came here, sat with that man for 2 years, and they went through the running of the Civil Aviation Authority. And therefore, the beginning of Civil Aviation Authority in this country was probably one of the best. I want to end by saying this, because I've really taken a lot of your time, is that if you want Uganda Airlines being a startup airline, you need not a board of directors. You don't need super people. You don't need models. What you need is a group of people you get, and they will now come, maybe 10 people. You have somebody as a chief, as their chairman of a task force. You've got a man in marketing. You've got somebody in finance. You've got somebody in engineering. You've got somebody in operation for the pilots and so on and so forth. So you have about 5 or 6 people. And they come. They set up the airline. They set up the different trends. And they should not be Ugandans if possible, because you have a tendency to play around politics. Let them start it off. Let them recruit the kind of people we need. Let them train them over a period of 3 years, and let them start our routes. And once the routes have started, like what they did in Emirates, then after 3 to 5 years, you can come up with a board. You can come up with the people you want to be to run that, and you'll find that you have a fantastic organization. And this is what can be, it has to be done. There's no shortcut around it. We cannot bring people who are very good, who go and convince leaders because they know how to speak a lot, they know how to lie, they know how to destroy others. No, you need somebody who's going to learn how to become a leader. Now, two things must be done in that airline. The first one, you must have a good financial management. Number two, you must have marketing, which makes the finances to run the airline. The rest are just tools. That is the airline.
Wow, thank you so much, Captain. Indeed. I've also listened to you, and I'm picking it from where you've constantly challenged the business model Uganda Airlines too, because you've been on record to say it was not necessary for us to purchase. We would have pursued the option of lease. Can you try to help anybody out there who is listening to us right now?
Yeah,
why you pursue the lease option as opposed to purchase?
No, let me take it. You people understand a very simple thing. Let me take an ordinary young man who wants to buy a border and start working with it. He's got very little money. Would he look for money to buy a border, or he will go and do a lease purchase, whereby he takes the border and pays every month, so that he can be able to have that border. Now, taking the border as an example, and taking people who have got buses and they want to start, and you're a poor man, you're not a very rich person, what would you do? Would you buy that vehicle straight away, putting all your money in it, or you would buy it on lease purchase, keep the money, pay it monthly, and at the same time be able to have liquidity so that you can operate that enterprise? Now, for the airline, it is even worse. We are talking about a capital outlay for the Airbus Neo, the 330. You're talking about $250 million to $300 million. Now, that's a lot of money. You either borrow it or you have it, and it is a lot of money to tie up into an asset. It is simple common sense. You never, when you're running an airline, you don't put that much money into an aircraft or into any tool for that matter. Today, in the international thing, you outsource. In fact, in your offices, these offices you see now, people don't buy those copying machines, typewriters, computers. They actually lease them, and every year or every 2 years, they change the whole lot, and they bring in new stuff, and they continue on their lease. Now, this is the new thing. You concentrate on your core business. You do not concentrate on buying and selling. So the airline, like Singapore Airline, like Emirates, like all these airlines, they don't buy this aeroplane outright. What they do, they go to those companies, they say, we want 10 aeroplanes, we shall buy them on lease purchase. So every month they pay a certain amount, or every 3 months, they pay a certain amount of money to the organization. It is not even the manufacturers who give you that. It's usually insurance organization, management consultants that have got money, hedge funds, people who have got money to put in those aircrafts. Now, once that is said and done, what Uganda Airlines should have done, because our routes had to be started anew, you had to go to these routes. You could have leased aeroplanes to start those routes, go Entebbe, Nairobi, Mogadishu, Entebbe, Mogadishu, Entebbe, Dar es Salaam, Entebbe, Dubai, Entebbe, South Africa, London, and so on and so forth. Get an aeroplane, start the route, get your brand going, start selling your name, start doing the route, and do the marketing of that route. And once the market of that route becomes okay, and you can be able to utilize that aeroplane for a reasonable number of hours, then you go away from lease and you go to lease purchase, which is different from lease. When you lease, it's not your aeroplane. Lease purchase becomes part of your aeroplane. And then you lease purchase it. You fly the route because now you are making money. When you lease, the profits are very small. When you lease purchase, the profits increases. And then when you see the aeroplane is becoming older, you take it back and they give you a new one. Because you are competing, your aeroplanes have to be, smack on. In other words, they've got to be very good. So these are the things that go on into aviation. And for a country like ours, which doesn't have that much money, it was not advisable to go and borrow money or to buy this aeroplane cash. It's totally uncalled for. For example, when you buy that Airbus, the ones you have seen, for $250 million or $280 million, immediately it comes out of that hangar with a tail number 5X, which is Uganda, you lose 20%. And after that, it begins to depreciate. The other day we had COVID, it even depreciated more. If you try to sell that airplane now, you will get 3/4 of the money that you paid. So you've got to be very crude up with numbers. You've got to know exactly what you're doing. And this is not something you want people who are waiting on the back of their ears to be in the management of this. You want people who really know. And I want you to know one thing. Aviation is got an airline intelligence. They know everybody who works in that airline. They know the bribes that take place. They know what you do. They even know that you are incapable. So when you go to negotiate with them, they know how to deal with you. So you need people who are crude up, who when they sit in front of these people, they will be able to bargain with them. They will be able to exchange with them. In other words, you need people who are on the ball. You can't have mediocres on this one.
Captain,
Yeah.
was the president ever advised on that business model that you've elaborately laid out?
Well, not the president. I was called by the task force in the Ministry of Works before they even bought those airplanes. And I gave them that background of leasing the airplanes and, if possible, not to buy. I also told them not to have a board of directors, but to have a team or a task force. And that task force, I did not want them to pick up Captain Babu or anybody like that. I want them to pick up an independent group that would come and start this airline. And if Babu was required, they would call him for a small consultants and pay him. In other words, we don't need to be told what we already know that can make that airline work. And we need that airline because it's strategic and we support it. And Uganda needs it. We're a landlocked country. We have got a good location. All we need is somebody to get that airline going. The pilots are good. The engineers are good. The technical people in the airline are very well trained because we are trained even in other countries. The problem is our management. That is where we need to work on.
Thank you so much. That's Captain Francis Babu. And our time is fast spent, but I can squeeze in a couple of questions and also bring Godba back online to give these parting shots. I'm still running with you, Captain. I'm sure you are also very familiar on what happened to the 25-year-old airline we had, I think, from 76 to around 2001. Are there similarities of the problems now and the problems then that led to us to wrap up the Uganda Airlines that wrapped up in 2001 that we can learn from and going forward try to avoid?
In fact, you brought that up. Look at the startup of that airline. It was an offshoot because our major airline, which had been started with BOC, had been unbundled, if you like to use the word. And we ended up starting a Uganda airline on the basis of the same thing, the same way we are doing this one. We started it on a whim. In fact, there was something called Uganda Aviation, which had been started by then the government to bring in duty-free things for the army. And that one now became Uganda Airlines. But it was started on those bases. We did not have...
Oh, did I lose?
Exactly the same way this one has started is exactly the same way it was started. In fact, it went on, it ended, it died in the hands of politicians.
So it's the same mistakes, it's the politics that killed it.
Correct. In fact, our problem is not the technical people, is not the country. It is a small clique of people who have completely refused to admit that an airline requires a different way or different approach, and requires people not only who have got business acumen, but who have got also the aviation in their background, and if possible, they are being trained. In fact, if we don't have them, we can train our people. I'm not saying they can't be. They can be very good managers if well trained by a group of people. If not, we can even attach them to Emirates, attach them to Singapore Airlines, attach them to some airline. Let them get the picture. Let them have a preview of how an airline's run. That's where the problem is. There's nothing else.
All right. Politics again, and that goes back to what we're discussing earlier, that fits into the the capture of state institutions. Is Godba on call? Because I want Godba to give us your parting shots. Okay, I think Godba is not on call. Captain, okay, Godba is on call.
Now, let me give you, you talked about state institutions.
Yes,
Why did they start them in the first place? That is the answer one must give us. Secondly, why did they go as if they had gone on a circus and made everything a state institution? Now, I've just seen what institution they want to remain, the very strong ones like URA and so on. But there is one I've just seen, they are trying to take it in the Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Finance should not take on all institutions. They should allow institutions that are making money. Now, let me use the word, very simple word. Institutions that are making money should be independent. Because immediately you put them under government, they will be sabotaged. So if there's an institution making money, let that institution be given all the powers that is required and let it work and give it good management. And I'll give you an example of an institution that's making money now. The games and betting and the lotteries, they are making money. Let it be independent. Let it work.
All right.
And there's a few others. And there's
yes,
a few others.
Yes. Godba, I on call. I want you to give us your parting shots, especially moving forward. How do we redeem? Is there any chance that we can redeem these institutions to function properly? Uganda Airlines inclusive. Godba, you there?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Can you hear me?
He has come now.
Yeah,
Good.
Godba, please. Yes.
Yeah, no, I think I fully associate myself with what our senior citizen, Captain Babu, has said. One, in terms of the professionalism and the technical competencies that you need to run an airline. Secondly, the fact that what kills institutions and ideas in this country is the politics, not the absence of experienced people. And so, but unfortunately for Uganda, and I have said this and again, and I will say it again because I don't think I can even apologize for it, that as long as President Museveni is in power and he wants to stay in power, everything will have to be compromised and organized to make sure that it supports his stay in power. So the room for maneuver to get things to work is very limited. You can only have maybe islands of where things look like they are working, but the moment he gets interested in that particular institution, you will see that it will just go down exactly the same way, because that's how regimes that have stayed for long, how leaders that have stayed in power for long, that's how they behave. Incidentally, besides the president of the country who ends up disorganizing and distorting everything, even for companies, for most companies, when CEOs stay in that position for a long time, they reach a point when they if a CEO is very good, the company will take off, go to cruising altitude, it will make money, it will be profitable. If that CEO stays for much longer, it can easily begin to lose altitude, because that's the nature of human beings. That is the nature of companies.
Thank you so much. That's good. And Captain, your parting shots, is there a chance we can toe a line between making the state institutions functional and managing the negative influence of politics that usually comes to kill the functionality of state institutions?
Oh, anything is possible. We can salvage. We can salvage what has gone wrong. We can make it look better. We've got, as my brother has just said, we've got people we can use. We can train people. We've got everything. Uganda, by the way, people should never tell you lies. We're the luckiest people on East Africa here. We have got all the human resource requirements. All you need is a touch. A little bit of touch, a little bit of cleaning up, and a little bit of honesty. The word here is honesty. Now, I don't want to really think the president is alone, but the people around the president, the cliques that go to give president some information, please, they are not helping us. And therefore, His Excellency the President should try and listen to another group of people. Let him get more information before making a decision, because he's putting some of our institutions to shame. Uganda Airlines would have been excellent, and I can assure you, given if they gave it what I'm telling you and gave it 3 years, you'll be very surprised. We will do very, very well. Already, even with all this confusion, they are doing very well on the Dubai route. They are doing very well on the Nairobi route. They are doing very well on the South African route. So what we need to do now is get the management organized. The people who are making it go are complaining. You know, a lot of what, by the way, forget about the top management. The general...
Captain, if I said something very quickly.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you see, I normally fly the Entebbe Nairobi Entebbe route.
Yes.
And I fly Kenya Airways and Uganda Airlines. And I can attest to the fact that the Uganda Airlines planes and the service, they are phenomenal when you compare with Kenya Airways. So really, the point you are making is just spot on.
Yes, that's right. So like I'm saying, we are very lucky. We are very lucky. We've got very smart people in this country. And by the way, even if they call us a banana republic, like these idiots are calling us, I don't care. Yes, we have bananas here. Yeah, but we have bananas here, and we eat them and we enjoy them. So, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm not impressed by that. What I'm impressed about, I want our country to get their fingers out and get the things going. And by the way, that airline, I can assure you, if you allowed me to get you 5 people, one in as a CEO, one as a marketing man, another one as a finance man, that airline would turn. You won't believe it. It will become one of the best airlines, and we don't need to know them. We don't even have favoritism. They will just come and work and train our people. And you know, there are many young people like yourself, the one who interviewing us. Do you know how many of your type we can train there? And tomorrow we get a very good managing director, and we get a very good chief executive officer. It's a matter of training. We have them. You know, I when I was interviewing people for CAA, we had a young man, 29 years of age, with a PhD in management. The only problem, he did not have an experience, but he was so good. If we had taken him home, 3-5 years later down the road, he would have been a guru of aviation. Okay. So it's a matter of getting our people and getting them in the right place. But we can turn it around. But we've got to get the politician to get their fingers out. That's where the problem is.
All right, and I think the catchword there is the politicians should get out of the business of Uganda Airlines, and it's possible to turn it around. That was Captain Francis Babu. Is one of the country's first trained pilots, and also is a veteran NRM cadre, retired captain, businessman, and a politician. It's been nice to have this conversation with you. I also with me had Godbert Mushabe, who is the Associate Director at the Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies, and we've been discussing the captivity of state institutions in Uganda, a case of Uganda Airlines. And I myself was moderating this session. I'm Felix Kafuma, and catch you again same time, same place. Bye-bye. Take care. Till then, God bless.